Hey there, and welcome to another Ask Me Anything session with yours truly, where I am answering all of your questions about the publishing industry and how to write a better book. And it looks like we got a little cameo from my puppy, Luca, who's not such a puppy anymore, he just turned 2. I've really enjoyed answering these questions and getting to engage with all of you on this deeper level, so please keep them coming. And if you're enjoying these sessions, please hit that like button and make sure you're already subscribed if you aren't already. Also, if you haven't already, download my workbook in the description below. It's my free story self-assessment that is going to help you identify the strengths and weaknesses in your book and take it to the next level. It's also going to sign you up for my newsletter where I release exclusive tips and insights that are not on my channel currently. So we have great questions today. Let's dive right in. First question here. Hi Alyssa, I have a question about book covers. How much say do authors have over the vision for their book cover? I've heard that the design team will ask the author for their suggestions as a courtesy, but in most cases, the author's suggestions aren't usually taken or the author can't request any changes. Would love your insight. So cover design meetings were one of my favorite parts of working at Penguin Random House. Basically how they worked is, yes, the design team would come up with their own design ideas. They would read the manuscript, so they would have a full sense of how the story unfolds, where it takes place, the tone, the vibe, the target audience, the characters, and then translate that into a visual concept. And let me tell you, it is a completely collaborative process. It involves a lot of people at the publishing house, and it does involve the author as well. What would happen is, for the initial design meeting, the designated artist for that book would come up with maybe 5 or 10 different types of concepts for the cover. Maybe one concept would be all text, for instance, but then another would have an image of the character. Maybe another would have an image of the setting. Maybe one would have photography, one would have illustration. They would have a bunch of different concepts, and then the editor who was responsible for acquiring that book, along with the imprint's editorial director and or publisher, who are the highest up people at the imprint, would discuss and talk about which cover concept they thought was the strongest. So maybe from 10 concepts, they would whittle it down to 3 or 4 concepts, and they would provide their input to the designer to iterate on those specific concepts, maybe change the font, the colors, etc. This is all going to happen, frankly, before the author sees anything. Then, once the editorial director, publisher, and or editor have agreed on a specific direction that they feel really strongly about, that is when they are going to get the author's input. The reason being is that they want to have something they feel really strongly about, something they feel is going to resonate with the market before they present it to the author, because they don't ultimately want too many cooks in the kitchen, which you have alluded to. And you are right that it is ultimately primarily the publisher's decision as to what direction to take the cover in. However, authors get really anxious about this point and think that if a writer hates their cover, that the publisher's not going to listen. In my experience, that was never the case. If the author had a serious problem with the cover, it was always heard, but frankly, that didn't happen very much when I was in the publishing industry. Far more often, we saw that the authors actually loved the cover and that the artist brought a vision to the story that they hadn't even thought of. Remember that the cover designers are hired as creatives to bring their own unique spin. So in my experience, that collaboration between all the people at the publishing house and the author worked really, really well. And of course, it results in a highly professional cover design that looks really high quality and is eye-catching. Next question here. Any advice for publishing more niche books? I have written a detailed cannabis grow guide with tons of information from the commercial cultivation world to make the information easily available and cheap. There is a big hole in the market. My book is about 17,000 words and around 50 photos detailing the process. Is it worth all the extra work to try to find an agent and publisher for the extra assistance, or would I have had several people read it to great reviews and I'm very confident it could be very popular with the right marketing? This is a great question. And choosing your publishing path is going to depend on a few factors. When it comes to niche books, like how to grow cannabis, the first question is how big of a target audience you envision for your book. This is something that you can certainly research on your end in terms of how many cannabis growers there are in the US, and that should kind of help direct you toward whether an agent and publisher would be interested or not. Typically, if we're talking about the big 5 publishing houses in the US, they are going to take on books that have a really wide commercial appeal. Think more general interest books. That doesn't necessarily mean by any means that they have to appeal to any reader. They certainly still have specific demographics that they are appealing to, but in general, books published by these major publishers have a pretty wide readership. That doesn't mean that they don't publish specialty books. For instance, they might publish a book profiling different cideries in the United States. But you can see how that still has a general appeal element that maybe a specific how-to guide doesn't quite. Something else to consider is smaller niche publishing houses that actually do specialize in something like how-to guides or who do specialize in something like agriculture or horticulture. That's definitely something to look into. Those smaller publishers might not require a literary agent's representation, so you could potentially approach them directly with your manuscript. As you referenced, if you have a strong marketing plan and vision and opportunities to get reviews of the book, then considering self-publishing makes a lot of sense as well, especially if you have connections within the industry that you are trying to target and can get the guide disseminated to those people and then spread the word that way through the niche community. So bottom line is it depends on the size of the niche. If there is a wider general appeal that you could incorporate for the book, in which case maybe it does make sense to go with a bigger publisher, and your ability to execute the marketing on your own, which might lead you more to self-publishing. Here's another question. I'd like to hear your thoughts on writing metrics. There are numerous tools out there that run analysis on your writing, pronoun counts, glue word percentage, sentence length, variability. Are there any you feel are particularly useful? So as a structural or developmental editor, I am much more interested in things like character development and pacing and plot twists and point of view than I am in evaluating the specific metrics that a writer's prose has. So when I'm conducting my type of editing, I'm not actually looking so much at those specific sentence level type analyses. That's not to say that they can't be useful. If you find the things that writing software like Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid is pointing out useful to you, I could see a situation, for instance, where pointing out run-on sentences is useful if a writer falls into that habit, then by all means use them. I would just caution that these do not replace the need for a structural/developmental editor as well as a copy editor. While you are working on the copy editing level with those types of analyses, you still do need that human eye to catch things and to review the flow of your prose, because ultimately software can only get you so far. But if it helps you identify some weaknesses in your writing, or perhaps if you want to check one of those statistics for some reason because you've gotten feedback that your writing has a specific issue, then by all means use them. But I don't think it's necessary by any means. Here's another question. Call me old-fashioned, but am I still able to bring my manuscript in person to literary agents, or is that approach dead? There's no agent that I know of that accepts a manuscript in person or accepts a manuscript via snail mail. The reason being is that, frankly, they could easily lose track of physical materials when everything is stored and organized online these days. And secondly, it's not really practical for you to pay for postage and all of that when you can send a manuscript digitally. Also, keep in mind that most literary agencies are based in New York City, so if you are not there where the agencies are, it really doesn't make sense for you to fly out there to hand deliver these manuscripts. Frankly, it's not going to make any difference to the literary agent and is potentially only going to give them a negative impression of you because you're not following their submission guidelines. It is very, very important for any querying author to review the agent and agency's specific guidelines on how they want to receive submissions, what you need to include in your submissions, because otherwise it is likely that your query is just going to go deleted without a response. I know it can seem like they're being really strict for no reason, but remember that literary agents get so many queries a day that they need to implement some kind of structure and organization to their process, so you really don't want to disrupt that, because it's only going to decrease your chances of a positive reply. I think that's all the questions we had for today. So if you have any additional questions, make sure you leave them in this comment thread here. I go through the prior videos when I am filming these videos, and so that's what I use as my cue. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and grab that free story self-assessment in the description below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching, and happy writing.